Hi, everybody. How are you this afternoon? If we can get the, oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Hello.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all so very much. We're sorry for the delay, having some technical difficulties. Technology is great when it works. And it's not working like we need to today, but we're going to get started. First of all, Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Today, we are really excited to host, first of all, to be almost on the other side of the election day, almost. We got a few more weeks to totally close out the 22 midterm election cycle, but we are here today to have this post-election media briefing. Part of that briefing is to release our election day exit poll results, as well as to hear from the leaders who really did the work from our NCBCP affiliate states and our state partners to just share their perspectives about what happened, what was lessons learned, and where do we go from here. So I thank all of you all for joining, and we will get started with our initial presentation, where we will, and Q, are you ready to queue up Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver and Dr. Elsie Scott? Are we ready for that? So we will start off our briefing with a release of the results of our Unity 22 National Election Day exit poll results. We do this every year. We've been doing it now during midterms and presidential election years, where we find out, as folks are voting, what are their voting experiences, as well as what made them show up. What are the issues that really had them to show up on election day? So I want to thank all of our state leaders who conducted those exit polls in 8 states. We do plan to do an additional exit poll in Georgia. Georgia has a runoff on December the 6th, where we will release those results at a later date as well. So Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, we will hear from you, and then we will hear from Dr. Elsie Scott, who will share some research that they conducted at our election day command center that focus on Black candidates in the 22 midterm elections. And then following that, we will have a roundtable discussion with our leaders from several states to discuss what I said earlier, which is about what happened and where we go from here, and what does it all mean in building Black political power. So Dr. Avis, and then Dr. Elsie, and then we'll open up for a couple of questions in case media has questions from that presentation, and then we'll have our roundtable, and then open it up again for media that may be on to ask questions. So Dr. Avis.
All right, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here to share the results of the early vote and election day exit polling analysis conducted by the Unity Coalition. We have provided here a great overview of what Black voters thought about their experiences and their priorities in key states, including Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and DC. Total sample size of 1,198 Black voters, okay? All right, so as we can see here, for the overwhelming majority of the voters, this was not their first time voting. These are 61% were returning voters, but a good chunk, over a third, 37%, this was their very first time voting. So it's good to see that there was still very good representation among individuals who were first time voters, and they inserted themselves into the process during a midterm year, which I think is very, very telling in terms of their excitement about their ability to utilize their right to vote. Now, in terms of rating their voting experience from a continuum of very negative to very positive, The overwhelming majority of voters indicated that they had a positive experience voting, either positive or very positive. About 3/4 of them mentioned that. Only about 6% of the voters that we surveyed in this exit poll indicated that their experience was negative at all. So for well over half of the voters, they actually voted on election day. So just over 60% did wait until election day to vote, and they cast their vote on that day. But a quarter of the people in the poll actually voted early. Okay, about 25% voted early, and 12% voted via absentee or by mail, with just 1% utilizing the drop box option. In terms of whether or not they cast a regular ballot or provisional ballot, we saw that just under 1 in 5 voters cast a provisional ballot. Over 3/4 of the voters casted a regular ballot in this election. Now, in terms of the educational attainment of the sample that we looked at with this particular analysis, we see here that overall, this was a pretty highly educated sample. Well over half of the participants had at least some college education. 1 in 10 had postgraduate work. Only 4% had less than a high school education, with about 15% who were high school graduates only. Now, we see here that over 3/4 did indeed show their ID in order to vote. So we see that this is becoming more and more a normal part of voting for many of the voters in our sample. And in terms of voting problems, we did see happily that over half, 61%, indicated that they did not believe they experienced any problems voting. But in terms of the problems that were shared, the overwhelming majority of those that were shared were actually people who had to wait longer to vote. So that 14 and that 17% there relates to people who waited 1 to 4 hours to vote, or 4 or more hours to vote. So when you add those two together, you can see that over 30% of the sample had to wait at least an hour, some well over 4 hours in order to cast their vote, which is very problematic. And the next highest representation of the problem that people faced was the fact that they were specifically asked to show their ID. In terms of why did they vote in this election? Over half indicated that they really understood the voting to be a personal responsibility. So they saw it as their responsibility to cast their vote in the election. 15% voted because there was a specific ballot issue that they wanted to weigh in on. 14% said that they voted because they wanted to vote in support of a particular candidate. So they were excited about a particular candidate that they wanted to vote for, while just 3% said they were specifically motivated to vote against a candidate. Now, in terms of issues that they want their congressional candidates to actually commit to, they were asked whether or not they voted for a congressional candidate who committed to the following issues. And the specific issues that most likely were the foundation of them wanting to vote then for their congressional candidates were things like congressional candidates who committed to reducing structural racism. Those who committed to protecting voting rights were sort of the main driver that really was something that was very attractive to these voters. They were more likely to support candidates who said that they were committed to that issue. Similarly, some 42% said that they were committed to supporting candidates who themselves committed to protecting reproductive rights. So by far, that triad of reducing structural racism, protecting voting rights, and protecting reproductive rights, when candidates indicated that those were issues that they were committed to addressing in their in their service as a public official. Black voters were especially motivated to vote for those candidates. Others that ranked pretty highly were those who expressed interest in working on behalf of addressing issues with regards to policing and criminal justice reform, those who said that they were going to work to protect the safety net, and those who said they were going to protect LGBTQ rights or reduce inflation. In terms of the top 3 issues that were priorities for these voters, the voters were asked to choose between a menu of some 14 different options with regards to issues that were important to them and main drivers with their vote. And as you can see here, most people, so how this should, what this really breaks down to is that the most likely choice to be the top vote, the #1 priority for the voters was racism and rise in hate crime. That was the #1 most often cited issue that was of the top 3 that people really wanted to support and drove their vote. The #2 issue in terms of racism was also racism and race crimes. That was 22% who said that that was one of their top 3 issues. In terms of people who suggested that reproductive rights was a key issue, 7% said that that was their #1 issue, 15% said that that was their #2 issue, and 18% said that was their #3 issue. The last sort of indicator over there refers to those who mentioned criminal justice and policing as their main issue. And for them, that was typically the case for those who were at about as a third choice. That was the most likely, the third option for our respondents. What issues are threatening you or your family? We asked our sample, the #1 issue that these voters saw as threatening their families was racism and rise in hate crime, followed closely by inflation and the cost of living. The next often cited issue was gun violence, followed by the cost of housing and unemployment. Now, in terms of how this sample broke out with regards to the respondents, nearly half of the respondents identified as female, with some 35% identifying as male. In terms of income, we see that this was a group of individuals who were at the, I would say, towards the middle class range disproportionately. So about 27% of the sample, about a quarter of the sample, made somewhere between 25 to 50,000, with 30% of the sample making 50 to just under 100,000, and some 12% of the sample made 100,000 or more. The preponderance of the respondents were in fact employed full-time, some 43%, followed by 12% who were employed part-time, 9% who were self-employed, 5% as students, 2% military, and 8% retired. Only 3% of the respondents were unemployed. And that's our general overview.
Thank you, Dr. Avis. And just so everyone knows, we are something happened strange there. Okay, there we go. We are live streaming. So for those who can, please share. This is being live streamed on NCBCP Facebook page, as well as Roland Martin Unfiltered, our media partner. And thank you, Roland. Now we will hear from Dr. Elsie Scott, and then we'll open up for a few minutes for any media questions, and then we'll move to our roundtable that will start off with our national team and then our state leaders. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I guess you can hear me. Okay. Can somebody put my slides up? What I'm going to talk about is some of the preliminary election results that we found. We spent the day, about 30 Howard University students identifying Black candidates in races across the country. And I'm going to report out on some of the findings we've been able to collate so far. Next slide. Okay, one of the things we looked at, and we've looked at this for the past 10 years, looking at Black women in Congress. And we see that this time we have 28 Black women won their positions. 2 of those are non-voting delegates. And so this is an increase of 2 from the last election. And all of the Black women who won their races were Democrats. 5 are new to the Congress. 2 are replacing members who did not run again. For example, Sidney Kamlager is in California District 37, which was originally represented by Karen Bass, who we are proud to report that she won the election to become mayor of LA. It was announced last night. And then you also had Jasmine Crockett from Texas, who took in Texas District 30, who took the seat that Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson originally held, and she had decided to retire. But we have some new faces that are not replacing former members. One of the big wins of the night was Summer Lee. Summer Lee is the first Black woman to win a race in Pennsylvania for Congress. So she will be the first Black woman from Pennsylvania representing Pennsylvania in the US Congress. And then we also, in North Carolina, there was a white male who decided not to run again, and Valerie Fauché won that seat in North Carolina District 4. And there was a pickup of 1 seat in Ohio. So now you have 3 Black women representing the state of Ohio in Congress. And that's Emilia Strong Sykes from District 13. One of the things we are finding that there are younger people winning in these congressional seats. And so you look at the new women who will be joining Congress, that Summer Lee is only 34 years old. She will be one of the younger members, as well as Emilia Strong Sykes is 36. And we find the similar thing. You could go to the men. We find a similar finding when we looked at the Black men. Black men only slightly outnumber Black women in the newly elected members of Congress. So we have 30 Black men who were elected on Tuesday, and 4 of those are 4 are Republicans. There are no Republican women, Black women in Congress, but there will be 4 Republican men, Black men in Congress, and 26 of the Black men are Democrats. 1 incumbent was defeated because of redistricting. His district was redrawn to the point that he did not have the same people in his district as he had before, and he was up against an incumbent. And so he was defeated. That was Lawson in the state of Florida. The new members who are male, who will be coming to Congress. 1 is Maxwell Frost. Many of you might have seen publicity on him, that he will be the youngest member of Congress. He's 25 years old, and he will be the first member of Gen Z that will be coming to Congress. And he's in Florida 19, which is a district that was originally represented by Val Demings. Jonathan Jackson from Illinois 1. He's taken the seat that was originally held by Bobby Rush, who decided not to run, who retired from Congress. Glenn Ivey from Maryland District 61. Glenn Ivey is taking the seat that was held by, let's see, he's now the Attorney General.
Anthony Brown.
Anthony Brown. So he took the seat that Anthony Brown originally held. John James is a new member from Michigan. You might remember the name. He ran for Senate last time and did not win, but he's decided to run. I think he ran for Senate 2 times, but he decided to run for a House seat. He's a Republican representing Michigan 41. And then Wesley Hunt is a new member, Republican, representing Texas District 41, and he's not replacing anybody that, well, his district is not a district that has been represented by Black people because it has very few Black people in his district. In terms of the ages, as I mentioned, Frost is 25, Jonathan Jackson is 56, Glenn Ivey is 61, John James is 41, and Wesley Hunt is 41. So I think the men on a whole are a little bit older than the women that are coming into Congress. Next slide. Okay, on the Senate side, we didn't have as much luck with our Black candidates, but the interesting thing is they came very close to winning. We had 3 Black candidates for Senate who received over 40% of the vote, but they lost. The only Black candidate for Senate that has won so far is Tim Scott, was reelected in the state of South Carolina. Well, we still have one race that has not been called yet. In fact, there's a runoff in December, and that's a runoff between Senator Warnock from Georgia and Herschel Walker from Georgia, and that will take place in December, and then we will know the full number of Blacks we will have in Congress. Next slide. Could we also look at state executives? These are people who hold executive positions within different states. And we did have some victories here, some historic victories. One in the state of Maryland, the first Black person was elected governor, and he's only the 3rd Black governor. That doesn't even sound right. He's only the 3rd Black governor to ever be elected in the US. And his name is Wes Moore. We picked up one new Black lieutenant governor in the state of Pennsylvania named Austin Davis. We picked up 2 Black secretaries of state in California and in Connecticut, both Black women. And we picked up 5 attorney generals, but 3 of them are incumbents who were reelected. But you picked up 2 new attorney generals who ran for the first time. That was Andrea Campbell in the state of Massachusetts and Anthony Brown in the state of Maryland. That was a very tight race for Keith Ellison in Minnesota, but he was able to win. Letitia James was reelected in New York, and Kwame Raoul in the state of Illinois. So that's I think it's one other state executive that I don't have on the slide. It's an auditor, but this is what we have found so far. And I'm pretty certain I think all the races have been called now in the statewide election. So that will be the number of Blacks we will have holding executive positions. We had more Blacks to run for governor, but we didn't have a victory. Stacey Abrams ran again in Georgia. Chris Jones ran in the state of Arkansas, and there were a couple other states where they didn't get a lot of votes. But it's good to see we're getting a lot of Black and younger Blacks that are running for Congress. And so we are proud of the fact that they recruited a lot of young people to participate in the election process. And you heard a lot about that young people were staying at home, young Black people were staying at home. We have not been able to find that. we found that young Black people were actively involved in the election this time. And as a result, you see the number of younger people who were elected during this period. Now, there were some initiatives, statewide initiatives. We are still in the process of tallying those. And there are at least 2 Black that were elected Speaker of their House of Representatives. This is at the state level. And so we're still in the process of looking at the state legislators. That's a lot of data, but we do know that Pennsylvania and Michigan both elected Black men as speakers of their House of Representatives. Now, let me just say one thing about Michigan before I leave, that a lot of people were sort of sad that, well, a lot of us don't like the fact that for the first time in about 70 years, you don't have a Black state representative coming out of the Detroit area. I mean, a US congressperson. But you know, we did, I think we're going to see some results at the state level in the state legislatures. I already mentioned that you got a Black man becoming Speaker of the House. But, you know, there were some redistricting issues, and we're finding that in a lot of states that the state legislators' districts were drawn and redrawn. And so you had some places where Black people did not, had some losses. But I think we're also going to see some victories when we finish with the data, looking at state legislatures. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions later when we get into the Q&A.
Thank you, Elsie. Q, if you could make sure my camera can come back on, please. Thank you. So thank you, Avis. Thank you, Elsie. We're gonna see if there are any questions. We know there are a few media on. If you have questions, we can open it up for a couple of questions. Either you can put it in the chat, or Angelo, if you wanted them to come over and on the screen. I have a question to start us off. Avis, I know that there were also quite a few young people in that poll as well. And if there was anything that you felt we needed to kind of lift up about what, because everybody's talking about the youth vote and how important that was. If you did anything you can glean from it that you like to share around that.
Sure. You know, I think young people are really making their voice heard, particularly around those issues that are important, right? So I think a lot that has to do with what we saw around protecting reproductive rights, protecting LGBTQ rights, addressing structural racism, and even protecting voting rights, I'm sure was heavily influenced by the priorities of young people. I also think it's notable that over a third of the people who participated in this poll were in fact first-time voters. And I think that's something to say, that's something to really pull out here, because we know that just generally speaking, the voting electorate tends to be larger during presidential elections and then contracts very significantly during midterm elections. So in an off-year election, to have, you know, over a third of those participating in this poll be first-time voters is something interesting to see. And I would not be surprised if a large chunk of those first-time voters were indeed young people who want to make sure that they had their voices heard.
Thank you. Any questions, Angelo? Oh, I see Garen Keith Gaynor. Can we move him over, Q, so he could ask this question? Or if you could put it in the chat.
I moved him over. I think he has accepted.
Okay.
Garen, if you can accept
Gaynor.
the invitation.
Okay. Okay. All right. And so if you could, so
Hi,
Gary,
can you hear me?
Mr. Gano, ask your question.
Hi, hello. My question is, obviously Black and young voters, as was previously mentioned, showed up to the polls for Democrats in hopes of getting results on issues that they care about most. Given the fact that the next session of Congress will be divided, what should, where does that lead? Where does that leave the Black agenda? And what should those policy priorities be?
Okay. Avis or Elsie, both?
Sure. You know, it is going to be a challenge that you do have a split Congress, right? So we can definitely expect that not too much is going to get through the House, right? That most of those who voted for their choices here would probably be in favor of. But one I think is very important to recognize is that the Senate will still be able to push through some judicial appointments that they would not be able to do if they had lost the Senate. And also the Senate is going to be a backstop, obviously, as well as the president, for stopping a lot that we might anticipate that the House might want to try to push through and would have been able to at least get further had they had both the House and the Senate with a strong right leaning. And so I think what this is going to mean coming up for 2024 is, as we saw in this particular survey here, you saw that there was a large number of people who came out to vote for something, but a very small proportion of people said they were voting against the candidate. I think when people are able to see more clearly the agenda of people who are now in charge of the House, that might actually work to the favor in terms of maybe even maximizing the Black vote even more in 2024, because it'll be very, very stark and clear to people what they are voting against and what they need in order to push through their policy priorities. So that actually might be, though it might be a delayed benefit, at the end of the day, once all the stakes are on the table in 2024, it'll be much more clear to people what is necessary in order to get their agenda across the finish line.
Thank you.
I would just add to that with more younger people coming into the Congress, we may see an agenda that changes a little bit, and not necessarily just on the Democratic side. There may be, because there were some people who ran who ran on the Republican side, who were not in favor of some of the things that they had seen being done by the Republican Party. So we have to see what this new group, because even the new two black Republicans who won, they are younger, they are 41, and so we have to see where they will fall in all of this. Will they vote some of the interests of maybe the Black community? I have to look at the number of Blacks they have. I know one doesn't have many Blacks in his district at all, but the other one I think has more Blacks. And so it may be that young Black people can influence people who are not necessarily in where how Black people have traditionally voted, primarily Democrats. But we have to, I'd say let's wait and see, but I'm optimistic that we will see some positive changes. And as Avis mentioned, that on the Senate side, we definitely will see, I think, more younger Black judges being appointed to the bench, more Black women appointed to the bench. And so that will be positive in terms of changing the judiciary. Of course, it won't change the Supreme Court, but we'll have to see if any people decide to retire on the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Elsie, and thank you, Garen. I think you're from the Griot. Is that correct? Just want to make sure I identified.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from you or any other media on the Zoom? Okay. Going once, going twice, and we will make sure to share with you all the results, and they will be posted up on our site shortly at unitycampaign.org. you can show up on there. Probably after 3 o'clock, you can get a hard copy. Thank you so very much. And so I want to thank Dr. Avis and Dr. Elsie for always being on the ready to share very, very important information and be able to be so that we can be informed. And that's also what we use the exit poll for every other year, is also help us know what the focus is so that we're not, when it comes to our policy agenda with Black Women's Roundtable, as well as the National Coalition overall. So thank you both. We're going to move right on into this next phase of our briefing today, and that is to talk about the election, to talk about what we learned from it, and what does it mean moving forward. So we're going to start off with a brief presentation overview of our Unity 22 campaign from Christina Q, who was our Unity 22 National Campaign Manager for the Coalition, and Daryl Coles, who's our Black Vote Project Assistant with the National Coalition. So Q and Daryl, and then following that, we will have a roundtable discussion with our leaders from the states.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melanie, for convening us. And thank you to all of our media partners in the media for being here, and all of you that are doing the work. We really appreciate just being a part of this movement. And so I'm just giving a recap of the Unity 2022 campaign. I was having difficulties, as Mel said earlier. Technology works when it works. So I'm fighting with my slideshow. But in July of 2022, the National Coalition launched the Unity 2022 campaign, which is our nonpartisan and multi-state voter engagement and organizing effort. And we built a coalition of over 50 national partners. Our common goal was to increase Black voter turnout and provide voter protection tools to ensure every Black vote was counted in the 2022 midterm elections. We hosted monthly coordination calls with our partners to keep them engaged with that throughout the campaign. Our campaign was broken into 2 phases. Our phase 1 was a summer of organizing and activism. In partnership with our Black women leaders and allies, we held a speak out and a call to action on the steps of the Supreme Court, fighting for our rights, freedoms, and safety and justice. And we also held monthly conversations for our Brothers Can We Talk Twitter Space series, which my colleague Daryl will speak on more later. We also provided tools and resources for our partner organizations and affiliates to recruit poll workers and poll monitors in their respective states and their organizations as a part of our New Era Foot Soldiers for Freedom program. And we provided social media tools to promote our Are You Vote Ready, which provides tools and resources to voters to know their voter registration status ahead of the upcoming election. The second phase of our campaign was our Vote Your Power, GOTV, and voter protection campaign. And it was anchored by a 30-day GOTV Power of the Ballot tour, where we visited multiple cities in the following states: Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, to bring joy to the community and our organizers and volunteers who are doing the work on the ground to help turn out the vote in their states, to emphasize the importance of policy issues that were at stake for Black communities in this election, and to encourage Black voters to demonstrate and own their power by showing up to the polls. The Power of the Ballot GOTV tour was sponsored by NEA, SEIU, State Infrastructure Fund, the KPOR Center, AARP, APW, and Nike. And we also want to thank the host of organizations that partnered with the National Coalition to make this GOTV tour a huge success. We also hosted weekly meetings with our campaign partners to amplify efforts to uplift each other's work to monitor and protect the Black voter turnout in the midterm elections. And in addition to our state leaders, our state leaders organized a final GOTV push in Alabama, Louisiana, Maryland, Virginia, and DC in the final weeks leading up to Election Day. On Election Day, November 8th, the National Coalition with the Thomas W. Dorch Institute for Leadership at Clark Atlanta University and the Ronald W. Waters Leadership and Policy Center at Howard University partnered this year to host the National Coalition's Unity 2022 Ronald W. Waters National Election Day Command Center. And we were both at Clark and at Howard with our volunteers with the purpose of monitoring the Black voter turnout in real time from national and state-based leaders and organizations, and to capture Election Day turnout data, provide political analysis, and to provide a platform for the stories of what Black voters are experiencing on Election Day. So thank you to our partner organizations who joined our efforts to help lead the way in monitoring and protecting the Black vote in the 2022 midterm elections. Now, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Daryl to talk about the Black Youth Vote and our Black male initiatives focused on lifting the voices and issues important to Black men and motivate them to own their voting power in the 2022 midterm election.
Thank you, Q. Thank you for everybody for joining. Again, my name is Daryl Coles, project assistant here for Black Youth Vote at the national office. So leading up to the midterms here at Black Youth Vote, we've had several events ranging from Twitter Spaces, IG Live convos, virtual town halls, peer-to-peer canvassing, candidate debate watch parties, and Halloween costume parties, while also getting people registered to vote, hosted by our BYV state coordinators, Jared Sawyer, Mary Pat Hector, Olivia Duncan, Marion Harold, and so many others. We use these events to create a dialogue with Black youth and Black men to ask what they wanted for their vote. So we partner with brothers from organizations such as Dr. Wes Bellamy with 100 Black Men of America, Brandon Kahi with NEA, Quentin James, co-founder of the Collective Education Fund, David John with the National Black Justice Coalition, and so many others to help bring in and narrate the dialogue. The key issues we picked up on were how Black men and young Black men wanted their voices, values, and issues not just heard, but to be taken seriously within this election cycle. So on the personal level, I believe we were able to achieve this goal, and we will continue to do so. To Dr. Elsie Scott's point, in my very own state, Maryland, we were able to elect Wes Moore, the first Black governor of Maryland, whose main focus and rollout plan is to bring economic justice and opportunities to Black families, to PG counties, in his own words, on his political plan website. And also to Dr. Elsie Scott's point, we also see in Florida, they elected Maxwell Frost, Florida's representative for his 10th congressional district, a 25-year-old Gen Zer who's been an organizer with ACLU, and his motto running was, "The system won't change until leadership does. It's time for poor, working class, and young people to have a seat at the table." So I say all of this just to reassure my brothers and sisters on the phone call. I do believe our voices are being heard. And to the Black men on the call, we must keep using our political power to elect and put the correct representation and positions of power in Congress. So thank you all. That's it for Black Youth Vote.
Thank you, Q, and thank you, Daryl, for that kind of overview. And so now, last and certainly not least, we will have our roundtable discussion with our leaders from the states. And so if everyone who can, please come up on the screen so we can see everybody. And so this conversation, we always look forward to. We know how much hard work it took to do what you all did. And we really appreciate your leadership, your partnership, and all that you do 365. It's not just about elections, it's about empowering our people every day. And so the first question is to everybody. And that question, the first question that we like to talk about is, what do you believe the impact that the Black vote had in things like protecting democracy and building Black political power, not just nationally, but right there in the states where you live? I'm gonna start off, I'm just gonna come up to the top of the screen and call who I see. I see, I'll start off with the first three sisters that I see. I see Deborah Scott, Krista Jones, Helen Butler.
Good. And I will defer to Helen to start off Georgia.
Helen, you're on mute. And then, and since we're in Georgia, we'll add Mary Pat. And then we'll go to Ohio, Florida, Michigan.
Well, what can I say? Thank you, Melanie, for convening us and providing this overview. Well, in Georgia, as you know, Black women Black males came along as well to bolster our turnout numbers. And so, and Mary Pat's going to tell you about what the young folks did. We definitely, Black women have always had an impact on the community. We always look out for our people. So when you bring a Black woman, you bring the whole community with you, not just our immediate family, but everyone with us. So truly, we still had our impact in terms of our turnout numbers. And as you can tell, we aren't finished and we have another round to go. We're saying, let's do it again in Georgia because it's critical that we have a voice as we did in 2021 with having someone in the Senate that will represent us and represent our issues. So we made a difference. We continue to make a difference. And we believe that we'll have the same amount of turnout or better than we had in the general election. So I'll listen to Deborah and Mary Pat, and I'll come back with other things that we had with questions with regards to Georgia.
Yeah, so, and thank you for that, Helen. Of course, one of the things that we definitely learned in Georgia, and we already know, as goes Georgia, goes the South and the rest of the country. We've learned that coalition building and working in coalition is essential. And that's a key takeaway that these groups have. We're not surprised by the flipping of the state 2 years ago, because we knew we had done the work. Collectively, Black women on the ground had done the work to register voters, to get people out, and to continue to get them out. So we knew that with every action, there's a reaction. So, you know, this the Newton's the third law of nature. For every action, there's an opposite reaction. So what we did is when they gave us SB 202, we figured out a way to combat that. So if they say you can't give out water and information and chairs 150 feet from the polls, we move further and allow people to come to those parties at the polls to pick up their materials before they even got in line. And some of the lines were long, particularly during early voting. We also learned that we have to give information to our voters as quickly as possible. They've taken civics out of the schools, so it's incumbent upon us as nonprofit organizations to give as much civic information as possible as to why and where you vote, and if your polling place is closed, what should you do, and what number should you call for a ride, or if you have a problem at the polls. So we've learned that we had to be resilient and also give information and have information that is ready. We also learned that our strategy on the ground needed to be superior, that we needed to, you know, knock on doors and talk to people. And that's really what it's about. As we have gone out in the state, it's really about talking to those voters one-on-one. That's what makes the difference when you have those conversations either at the doors or at these events, because it really opens up the window for them. And that's one of the things that we can say that as a collective that we did, that we worked together, that we knocked on doors, that we called people, that we made sure that there was a collective approach to getting Black women out, Black families, and of course, Black youth. And I'll kick it over to Mary Pat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I will tell you that young people contributed a great deal to protecting our democracy this go round. In 2018, we saw about 87,000 young people vote early in the state of Georgia. This year, we saw over 200,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 29 vote early in the state of Georgia. Records are showing that this past midterm election, we saw the second best youth voter turnout in 3 decades right here in the state of Georgia. And I believe it's because of the great work that many of our young people within Black Youth Vote in coalition with the HBCU Green Fund, Georgia Stand Up, and the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda have been doing and mobilizing across campuses in the state of Georgia. Like Mrs. Deborah said, while we face obstacles such as Senate Bill 202, we worked even harder, and numbers are showing that. And so we know that we are working up against a clock. We have a runoff in what feels like tomorrow, in a few weeks, and getting the right information out to the voters is what is most important for us now. And so what we are doing specifically for Black Youth Vote is we're making sure that we're knocking on doors. We're trying to reach and hit students before they go away for Thanksgiving. We're connecting with churches and grandmothers to make sure that when those kids do go home for Thanksgiving, that grandmothers and families are saying, great, now that y'all are here, we're going to eat. And come next week, we're all going to wake up together and we're going to go early vote together. We're trying to do as much as we can with the short and small amount of time that we have, thanks to Senate Bill 202, but we're going to keep pushing, and Georgia's going to do it again.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Virginia, and then I apologize, make sure that you introduce yourselves when you do speak. Virginia, Michigan, Florida, and then following that is Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, DC.
Did you miss
Did I get that
Ohio?
right? Did I miss Ohio? Yes, I did. I'm so sorry. What's happening now is the boxes are moving, so that's not really good, right? So let's start. I think we'll start with Virginia, Florida, Ohio, and then Virginia. Maryland, Michigan.
My name is Krista Jones. I'm one of the
co-conveners. 3 at a time.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. My name is Krista Jones. I'm one of the co-conveners for the Black Women's Roundtable in Virginia. It's a little bit more difficult in Virginia to collect some of the data quickly because we don't collect based on race. But in terms of the work that we have been doing, we've been working all year, and that's something that I'm really glad that, you know, in our community, we're understanding that we just can't have an election season. Like Melanie, you just said, this is an everyday thing. So for us, in terms of getting out the vote, it's an all year process. It's about civic engagement. It's about getting in the schools. It's about doing everything. We were happy in Virginia that we had almost a 50% voter turnout of registered voters, which is the highest in a midterm when it has not been a Senate election on the ballot. So that was great news for Virginia. We also know that our provisional ballots quadrupled since last year. And so that was mainly because Virginia has same-day voter registration now, which is a huge advancement in terms of voting rights in Virginia. We also know that there was an increase in ballots around college campuses. So in terms of what Dr. Avis was saying, in some of the voting turnout with younger people, we're sure in Virginia that definitely helped as well with that increased voter turnout. So in terms of, you know, Black people working to get out the vote, we have a number of organizations that work on the ground throughout the state, really working to get Black voter turnout up. We're excited about the results from 2022. We have a state level elections next year. And so we're just hoping to keep the momentum going to make sure we can continue expanding a lot of the rights we've talked about today and a lot of the issues that were mentioned in the poll for Black voters.
Florida.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Melanie. So in Florida, we came.
And please introduce yourself too.
Okay, I'm sorry. So my name is Solandra Benton. I am the state convener for the Florida Black Women's Roundtable and also the executive director for the Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation. We came into Florida with a lot of obstacles coming in with redistricting and also with the governor having this task force locking up people for voting. And then we also had our hurricanes that, so a lot of stuff hit Black folks. But that did not happen because of our people being resilient. Early voting, one of our counties that's high populated of Black people, they had a 63.9 turnout rate. We had families coming in. It was early voting. We had, as everyone said, the young voters really showed out. Florida had the highest average over the statewide of young people actually showed up. Country showed up to vote. So we're excited that we're going to make sure that we continue to do what we always do, is to gauge our communities 365 days a year, because we know we cannot do this just on election cycles. We also realize that education, as Deborah and some others said, that we have to start early, regardless. Finances may not always be there, but we're going to have to do this because we cannot wait to the last minute for our people. It's not good enough for them to be on the polls, but we have to educate them to, move off the voting poll into actually voting at the polls. That's where the power lies. So that's what we're going to be doing in Florida. We're people saying count Florida out. They're not, but they're not a battle state, but we are a battle state because we just showed you we sent the youngest congressperson with all this craziness going on in Florida to Congress. So we're encouraged. We're getting a lot of feedback and phone calls from young people and men, excited, ready to, pull up their sleeves and do what they need to do. So we're excited.
They say every state is a battleground state if you live in it. Thank you, Solange. Ohio, PD.
Yeah, good morning. I'm PD Talley. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Coalition on Black Civic Participation and one of two co-conveners of the Ohio Black Women's Roundtable. Ohio is similar to a state like Florida. Started out with challenges due primarily to redistricting. Our redistricting maps at the congressional level as well as the state level were challenged at state court. State court ruled that the maps were gerrymandered, but a federal judge ruled that that was what the voters were going to vote on in both the instance of Congress and the state legislative. And so that presented challenges, as you can imagine, at the polls. We were challenged in the primary election, having to be forced to have two primaries, which voters were not necessarily used to, and then to go back again for a general election. And so I believe that process definitely impacted on turnout. Turnout in Ohio was slightly lower than it was 4 years previously in 2018. And even though there were challenges with the confusion around redistricting and going back and voting in more than one primary, Black voters still had their say on Election Day. They were very much present in a city like Akron, where there was a charter amendment on the ballot to get a police commission following the shooting over the summer of Jayland Walker. Those young Black voters in Ohio worked throughout the summer doing voter registration, getting people registered, getting people to sign a signature to get the issue on the ballot. And then they turned around and came right back out in November and made sure that they passed that measure. That was a real bright spot. And because of the amount of activity there in the city of Akron, there was an African-American, there will be another African-American that will represent Ohio in Congress. First time in the history that we've had three Black women from Ohio to represent the voters in Ohio in Congress. And so there were bright spots, that there were challenges. We're committed to continuing to be civically engaged in this space throughout 2023 so that we can make sure that we're getting our young people out and other people out and change the dynamic of turnout in most urban cities, which tends to be somewhat of a problem.
Thank you, Petey. I see Vincent Sylvain from Louisiana. I see and Luana Brown from Maryland. And I see, at least by phone, Reverend Dr. Judith Moore from Pennsylvania. And then Tamika Ramsey also moved the box up here, up top, sorry, y'all. I'm in these boxes from Michigan. I think it's 4 states left. I hope I haven't left anybody out.
Yeah, Vincent Sylvan with the Louisiana Unity Coalition. I serve as the state's convener. My partner, Gwen Hughes, Black Women's Roundtable, is not able to join us at this time. I would like to go ahead and point out and deal with primarily 3 races in Louisiana. We did not have a whole lot of competitive races in the congressional race, but one in particular, the 2nd Congressional District, which had and have an African-American congressperson. That district was sort of controversial because as we fought this battle to try to increase a 2nd Congressional District with a Black majority in it, there were attempts to go ahead and basically strip that seat and create 2 right at 50-50. And history tells us that, at least in Louisiana, it's very difficult for Black African Americans to win races where the margin of registration is right at 50%. So we were pleased that we were able to hold on to that seat with 72% of the votes going for the Black incumbent in that seat. The other race of particular significance was a state Senate race, a historic Senate seat that since 1979 had been held by a Black person, both Black male and Black female. But because this was a specially appointed race, there was the district line had changed, and the district line changed to make that district a white majority. Well, the Black candidate in that race was able to go ahead and win that race. So he moves from the state House side to the state Senate side. And the third thing that I would like to highlight is the city of Bogalusa. Bogalusa has a long, rich history of civil rights. It was the place where the Deacons for Defense was found. Many of you may be aware and familiar with that. The Deacons for Defense, of course, was an armed African-American self-defense group. Well, this past election, they were able to elect a Black 23-year-old male as their mayor. And I think that spells nothing but success and potential success. And hopefully it's going to serve as encouragement for other young folks to get in these political races and take over some of those smaller seats and therefore be used as a training ground for the bigger races throughout the state.
Thank you. Tamika Ramsey, Michigan.
Good afternoon. My name is Tamika Ramsey, and I am the Executive Director of the Michigan Coalition on Black Civic Participation in the BWR convener for Eastern Michigan. In Michigan, our values were on the ballot this turnaround. We had 3 proposals, Proposal 1, 2, and 3, that got a lot of people out to vote. Proposal 2 was expanding our voting rights. In 2018, the state of Michigan approved a ballot initiative to expand our voting rights. In 2020, when the pandemic happened, a lot of those newly received things we fought for so hard, we were able to use them. No reason absentee voting. The Secretary of State sent out an absentee ballot to every voter in the state of Michigan because of the pandemic. Drop boxes were given in rural communities and urban communities. But what we saw in 2021 was trying to pull back all of those rights that we fought so hard for in 2018. So in 2022, the Prop 2, I believe it was Promote the Vote 2, came and expanded those rights. So now we have up to 9 days early voting for no reason. So there's no reason to do no absentee voting anymore. We can start actually voting 9 days before the election. We are now able to start processing ballots at 7 o'clock in the morning for the day of the election so that those absentee ballots are processed as well. One of the biggest proposals that was on the ballot was our reproductive freedom for all. We talked about more than just abortion, and NCBCP was a very big part of the coalition that talked to Black women. We talked about freedom to make reproductive justice choices and not just focusing on abortion. Those two ballot initiatives got people out to the polls. We had our youth on college campuses standing in line until 2 o'clock in the morning to vote. We had our partners across the state making sure that those people did not get out of line. One of the biggest things that we were able to do in Michigan, and people say, oh, you know, Michigan did a good job in 2022. We started this work in 2020. We started this work with the census, making sure that people were being counted in urban and rural communities where Black and brown people are there and just don't get counted. Because we did so well with getting those Black and brown people counted, when it was time for redistricting, our first year for an independent redistricting commission, we also engaged those same Black and brown people to make sure that they were drawing lines that fit their community of interest or their just regular community. So that really did help. For the first time in 40 years, Michigan, we actually have a trifecta. And that was because, once again, we started with the census and we communicated with people. We worked with redistricting and made sure that everyday people knew they were drawing lines and were holding the electeds accountable. And then we started working to get people out to vote and using things like the pandemic, like redistricting, to get in Prop 3, which was reproductive freedom for all, getting those people educated and making sure that they were aware. We need to continue to do that. We do not need to take any days off, right? The fight and attack on democracy happens every single day, even when we have quote unquote off years. And if we stop, if we rest, if we don't use that time to educate people and get them moving forward, then we're going to fall behind. And so in Michigan, we will keep that fight going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Dr. Judith Moore, I know you out in the streets somewhere. So we'll call on you from Pennsylvania, and then following her will be Maryland, and last and certainly not least for this first round of questions, Alabama in the house. So Reverend Moore, are you where you can talk? If you could take her off of mute, Q. Might not be. Okay, we'll come back to her.
Hello?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Listen, we were on the ground, I mean, long time. And we just got out and we canvassed. We did everything everybody else was doing, phone, text, and calls. There was some challenges that we had in the mail-in ballot, where we had to do some last minute knocking on doors to make sure that they were able to cast their vote. The exciting part is we have for the first time more Black representation on the state level. So now for the first time we have a Black woman who is Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania. Also the president of Pennsylvania Black Legislative Caucus is now a Black woman. And for the first time, we've elected a Black woman to serve on Congress. And so we're excited about that. The downside of that is that it opened up two doors that were previously held by Blacks. And because of the redistricting, there's a concern that those votes may not be filled by the representation of those communities. But we're excited though. Gen Z increased their voting. And also Mon Valley didn't get the increase that we were looking for in terms of getting out the vote, but it was an increase. So we're excited about that, and we have more work to do, but we are on the right track and we'll continue to fight.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Maryland and Alabama,
Hi, good
one more
afternoon.
round of questions and we'll be done, and thank you.
Okay, sorry, Melanie. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is LaWanna Brown. I am a co-convener of Black Women's Roundtable here in Maryland and DC. And like many of you, we did start back with the census back in 2020 to try and get people engaged in what we knew was going to be a fight to get people out to the polls. So we used that census information to try and make sure that we were able to look at and monitor the redistricting that tried to happen here in Maryland. We were able to make sure that those lines were not redrawn, especially here in Prince George's County, so that we could be represented.
Hugh, put folks on mute. Q. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. But yes, we wanted to make sure that we were able to get in front of the redistricting, which we knew would possibly happen. And fortunately, we were able to get in front of that. As far as this election here in Maryland, we were and DC, excuse me, we were able to get canvassers out in the neighborhoods just to knock on doors to make sure that people were able to get out to the polls, that people were aware of the midterm elections. Surprisingly enough, there were a lot of people who still were not aware. So we were able to get people out and engaged in that way. We also did a couple of pop-up. We partnered with Community of Hope AME Church here in the area, and we were able to do a couple of pop-up election parties in a couple of districts here in Maryland to get voters out. And they got, little prizes and things, free food when they had their I voted stickers. So that was a lot of fun to just kind of get people engaged. Before the election, we partnered with NCBCP for Get Out the Vote. And we collaborated with some other agencies and organizations here in DC and Maryland just to get people engaged in the process and just really get people out to vote. We do have a new governor here in Maryland, our first Black governor here in the state of Maryland. And so we are just looking forward to, again, continuing this work. As Tamika said, we don't get a day off, so we have to keep pushing, we have to keep engaging, and we are ready to do that. I myself got registered to help people get registered to vote. So I went through and did that process, and we're going to add more people to that process so that we can make sure that we are keeping people engaged in this. We're keeping people aware, and we'll get people out, and prepared for 2024. So we're ready to keep up this work and keep fighting. And I look forward to working with all of you to do that.
Thank you, Luana. And I believe y'all had, was it another person of color, lieutenant governor too?
Yes. Yes, yeah. with Westmore.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alabama, I see Letitia and Sheila. Ladies, formally introduce yourselves and give us your take on the 2022 election. Letitia?
Can you hear me?
And then Sheila? Okay, there you go.
Can you hear me? Okay, I really didn't, I was trying to stay off of camera.
That's good. Thank you. I know we know you're out in those streets, so okay. you can just use your audio. And then Letitia, so, thank you.
So what happened in North Alabama? We won in a lot of local races, but it came from educating the community over these last 4 years. And I have not seen Black youth vote work so hard. And our senior citizens, I had never seen them work this hard. And it comes from having 2 calls a month, along with pulling the voters that's registered that haven't voted in the last 2 elections. So we had local elections and we had state elections. The local elections, we won in a lot of those.
No, we didn't win. We won turnout.
We won turnout in the Black community.
Yeah.
Okay, we won Black turnout in the Black community. So the people in the Black and brown community where we had low voters turnout, we had 3 times more people to turn out in the last 8 years. So that's a win for us. We managed to get polling sites at some of the Black colleges that we did not have. We managed to stabilize polling sites in the Black and brown community that we did not have, that was walking distance from the population that was not voting. So we managed to bus the children through the public school system in more than 14 counties to the poll. So that means every 18-year-old they had in the school system was able to vote when it was hard, Melanie, for us to do that in in 8 years. So that's a plus for us. So we went right back at it again, starting today. Back with the educational piece, back with what we want done within our communities. I don't care if you fight all day, but if you don't know what you want, you just fight. So now we're going with what we want. We got a call went out throughout the counties, calling Congress to vote on, it's like 4 or 5 different things. We had one of our mayors to go down there to fight for medical marijuana law. That's in a lot of these counties, which the state approved, but he's trying to decriminalize it also and let some people out. So it's so much going on in Alabama. And I'm like Sandra with Florida. I thank you, Melanie, for investing in us. Don't count us out in Alabama, because you got 2 powerful women. Letitia is over there. She's something to deal with over there in South Alabama. Letitia's smart. Letitia writes the education piece for us to go out in these communities, and we're going to win. She's writing that piece for us. We go out and put it out and make sure we put it out in the communities where people has low voters turnout. So I said, thank you, Black Women Roundtable, and hooray for Alabama. Go ahead, Alabama.
Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it. Letitia.
Thank you, my sister Sheila in North Alabama. I'm Letitia Jackson in the southern part of the state. We have, and I want to echo the thank yous for Melanie Campbell and the Black Women's Roundtable, because without the resources that you work hard to bring to us, we would not be able to do any of the work that we've been able to do over these several election cycles. We don't work just during the election cycle, we work year round, and you helped to make that possible. So thank you for that. In South Alabama, we had we had both state and local elections as well. And one of the things that we saw that we believe is a result of the map that has already been ruled by 2 courts as discriminatory maps. We lost the only African-American state legislature that we had in our area. And that was just a travesty. And there are a number of things that we are looking at to make a determination and analyzing that particular race as well as other races. But we had people that were, because our voting rights have been under attack, not just more recently, but in the state of Alabama historically. And we have spent a lot of time and effort going around to, as Sheila mentioned, we target people that are registered but have not been voting. We went to housing projects, we went to multifamily units, we did phone calls, canvassing, we had a robust operation on election day, driving people to the polls and turning people out to vote. However, we had good turnout, we had robust turnout, but overall, I think the numbers are going to show when we finally get all of the analysis done, is that our turnout in the southern part of the state was lower than it was in our last election. But we are working hard to encourage and mobilize and motivate our voters. A lot of our voters are thinking that their vote doesn't count, and that even when they vote, we are still not able to elect representatives that focus on the issues of our communities. And that's the important part, the issues of our community, the things that affect our families every day. And so we will continue to educate, to mobilize, and to continue to increase turnout. I'm really, really proud of our young people. Our young people really learned a lot in this cycle. It's something about trying to oppress and keep people down. When you turn the light bulb on, which is what I believe has happened with our young people, they see how easily our rights can be taken from us, the rights that they have enjoyed all of their lives, that some of us were alive when we could not vote. And they understand now that it is a responsibility for them to be able to exercise the right to vote and to be able to turn out and educate others. So I think the sleeping giant of our young people has been aroused and awakened, and I believe it's going to continue to increase. So they are going to continue to be a force to be reckoned with, not only in the state of Alabama, but across this country. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you so very much. Now, this is the lightning round. And this is one last question. We know everyone has a busy day. So this lightning round question, we heard some, I think it was important to hear. You all answered a lot of what we had, and a couple of little questions so we're not going to reiterate questions that you kind of in many ways answered when it comes to not only what happened, but how did we build Black political power? Some cases we saw it move forward, some cases we slipped back. We understand that the systems that are in place are impacting that. And so now, as we get ready for 2023, well, we know we got one more race to run in Georgia. So we will be all rolling up our sleeves to support our leaders in Georgia, to make sure that the Black vote turns out in Georgia. So that's right in front of us. And we got 3 weeks, and we got Turkey Day in between and all of that, and some rest somewhere in between, hopefully, and all of that. But want to ask you all the questions as we prepare for the 2023 and really 2024, but right in front of us is 2023. And so what are the top 2 or 3 issues you heard from our exit polls that showed a lot of what Black folks said we were concerned about? We heard racism was still high on the list, voting rights high on the list, reproductive rights high on the list, issues around income, not income, but inflation and cost of living high on the list, criminal justice policing reform high on the list. So can you tell us what you see as the issues that you are going to hone in on and focus in on? And we're going to try to do that in 1 minute apiece, if that's okay with everybody. Just tell us what you see as what you're going to focus on, your organizations collectively and individually are going to focus on to leverage the power of the power of our ballot, the power of our collective work and individual work, that I celebrate you all again and thank you for what you do each and every day, 365. So I saw Letitia, since you're right there.
Thank you, Melanie. What we're going to do is we're going to continue to do the robust voter education that we have been doing all along. One of the things that we have found out in this cycle, particularly as we were dealing with our Supreme Court case over redistricting, is that our young people really did not understand how power is built, how policy is made, how the laws that govern their very lives take place. And this gave us an opportunity to educate them, to let them know exactly what it means and how their role in it can change the trajectory of what we're dealing with, not only in Alabama, but in this country, but specifically in Alabama. So we will be doing civic engagement education. We will be doing what we're going to call coffee and conversations, discussions around with our intergenerational discussions with our young people and our old people, so that we can teach our young people the history of voting rights in this country, how we got to where we are and why we're still fighting. Because I think once they grasp that completely, they will be the ones that take us forward. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in South Alabama.
Thank you. Deborah, Helen, Vince.
All right. So one of the things that we've learned is about building the infrastructure, right, of the state. So we have to continue to do that. So we're going to move our program to a 365-day of canvassing. So even when we're in an off-season election, we're still going to canvass and talk to our folks, because that's what it's going to make the difference. They need those conversations along with that popular education. So making more of our materials available for the community in a popular form, partnering with the schools more to start teaching more about how democracy works, and then building upon what we've done with young people to make sure that they are ready for now and next. So building out the infrastructure of the organization and the young folks, but also building out the infrastructure of the state.
Thank you, Helen, then Vince.
Well, I think I'm a combination of Deborah and Letitia, because education is critical to everything that we do. And one of the things that we always do is try to protect that right to vote. So that's always going to be number one for me, is making sure that we're protecting that. We're always plaintiffs in lawsuits, so you'll see us continue that trend as well. But we've got to begin to educate, and for me, it's equity. Equity for economics, equity in education, equity in healthcare. That's what's important to us all, making sure that our communities have equity in these policy areas, and making sure that we get the right people elected that will make those policies for us. So continuing the engagement of all of our partners, our local, our national, our state partners that we work with across the state. And like Deborah said, building an infrastructure with people in communities that can reach people in communities. So that's for us what we will be continuing to do. But foremost is protecting that right to vote and getting new protections for that right to vote. Mel, I may not go to jail with you, but I'm going to still be fighting to get that right to vote.
Oh, thank you, Helen. And hopefully I don't have to go to jail in 2023, but you know, we do what we got to do.
Do what we have to do. But before we get off of Georgia, we do want to remind people that we are in a runoff and we do need help. We need support here in Georgia, both on remote texting and phone banking, as well as resources for these nonprofit organizations that have been saving democracy on the ground. That is needed.
Vince, then Luana, Tamika, Solandra. In the queue.
Information. You know, it was interesting as we fought this battle over the past year plus around redistricting. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, I don't know if you all understood the importance of what I was saying. Well-intended Black leaders had that focus on getting a second seat. The conservative movement created maps that made it look like we were going to get that second seat. And it wasn't until we stepped in and said, wait a minute, fellas, not only will we not get that second seat, we're going to lose the seat that we have with these numbers, you know. And a lot of folks were probably thinking that, but many of our Black leaders was afraid to say it because they did not want to appear as if they weren't for what the progressive wanted. You know, but we felt that we had to get that counter message out there and get that understanding out there. The other thing that we got to do a lot more probably, intergenerational pairing. We did that with this election cycle where we took some of our younger workers and we moved them to the senior citizen center, working with the senior citizens that were in place. And I was listening to conversation that was happening. They were impressed, the younger folks, that there were people in wheelchairs, people with walking canes. One guy, and they all were senior citizen, older, he had a beer in his hand. And had probably had a few more beers earlier that morning, but he felt it was important enough and he was still aware enough that he had to go and vote, you know, and that impressed those younger people. And I think, you know, that kind of, hopefully that helps to inspire them so that we can use their younger legs, their younger bodies to do more of this GOTV effort that we have in place. And as I mentioned earlier, more young people running and winning, because if we can win the smaller seats, that becomes the training ground for those state congressional seats. You know, it's sad that right now in Louisiana, we don't even have a bench. We don't have a bench for the governor's seat. We don't have a bench for the lieutenant governor's seat. We don't have a player that we can put into the game for the treasurer, secretary of state. There's no bench in the state of Louisiana. And if we're going to build a bench, it's going to have to come from a younger generation where they win some of these small school board seats, mayor's office, city council, local city council, and then they put them in a position to be able to step up and take the big races.
Thank you, Vince. All right. Lawana, Tamika, Salandra. And then the last group, last but certainly not least, will be Petey, Sheila, and Krista.
Thank you, Melanie. It sounds like we all have the same ideas in mind, because we're also focusing on voting rights here in Maryland and DC. And one of the takes that we're doing is we're trying to get our young people involved in civil engagement and trying to get more people to run for office, you know, to not run from it, but to run to it, especially if they feel called to that. And so we are trying to, of course, make sure that the redistricting doesn't happen the way that, you know, like you were saying, Vince, that, you know, we need to watch that and keep an eye on that, because we know that that happens and it slides in and no one's paying attention. Next thing you know, whole groups of people are off the registers or not able to vote, or they're voting in districts that have nothing to do with their issues. So definitely keeping up with voters' rights, watching what's happening with redistricting, and then of course, you know, getting our young people involved in the process, getting them excited and energized about the ability to vote and what that means and what was sacrificed for them to be able to vote, and to really get them and their friends involved in that process. I like what you said, Vince, about pairing younger people in senior homes, you know, and with seniors, so that they can understand what it means to vote. So I think we're going to kind of steal that idea from you. So thank you for that. But yeah, that's where we're looking right now. Just you know, voter rights and that civic participation, and getting people to really understand how important it is for them to be involved in the process, to be educated about what's happening in their respective areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Lawana.
So in Michigan, we had 4.3 million people vote. In 2018, it was 2.2, and the closest governor's election before then was in 2002, which was 1.7, right? So we want to continue to increase those numbers. So we are, of course, starting with education and outreach, but one of the things that Black Women's Roundtable and NCBCP with our Black Youth Votes and our 100 men, Black men in Michigan do is we stay ready so we don't have to get ready, right? We continue to educate people. We continue to do listening sessions to see what people's concerns and issues are. And so we will be focusing on pocketbook issues such as living wage and student loan debt, which is very big in Michigan as it is across the country. And then we focus on freedom and justice issues. And so reproductive freedom, once again, I tell people Roe v. Wade did not give Black women body autonomy, right? It was reproductive freedom that was coined in 1994 that started to give us hope to expand the rights of Black women having body autonomy. Also, criminal justice reform, with marijuana becoming legal in state by state, we have to get our Black men out of prison for these crimes that now white men are benefiting from financially. One of the other biggest things that we're going to focus on is leadership development pipelines. We cannot keep saying we don't vote for Black people when we don't teach them how to run and then we don't fund them. So we are looking to get Black organizers, Black data support, right? So making sure Black people know how to use the numbers and help us use those numbers to storytell. Then we need more Black leadership. We need to focus and make sure that we have Black nonprofit leaders who know how to run organizations, and then getting out Black candidates, and also making sure we're training people to be on these boards and commissions. The other biggest thing we're focusing on in Michigan is our Supreme Court for 2023. For the first time in history we had a Black woman run, and she unfortunately did not get elected, but one of our Supreme Court justices is retiring. And so we are hoping and will advocate for the governor to appoint this Black woman, because we need to make sure that our issues are heard. And if we haven't learned anything from the federal government, is Judge Brown being on the Supreme Court has shown us what it actually looks like for a Black woman who has the experience and the family support and the community support to advocate for Black people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Solandra, Petey, Sheila, Krista.
So in Florida, like it's we're singing at this point a choir: education, education, protecting the voters' rights, because we know that that's the foundation of everything. If we can't have a voice in the game, all these other issues is mute. Okay, so we got to first protect the foundation that our ancestors fought and died for, is making sure that we could continue to have the vote here in Florida, continue to educate and support and resource younger voters as well, organizers, because we already have an attack already that they want to, because they want to be able to increase the voting age. Because they already see that young people coming out, so they already the opposition is already trying to do so. We're going to be dealing with that and making sure that we're not on defense, but we are ahead of the game and making sure that does not happen to discourage the young people. We're going to do a lot of education across the state of Florida on civic engagement. I think this is an opportunity where they want to take that out of the classrooms, that our organizations could fill in that hole, and do this partner up with our churches and our different organizational community partners that we have across the state, and to make sure that we really go deep and have those educational sessions and listening sessions. So that's what we'll be focusing on in 2023. We do have some young sisters also in local government and state government that also got elected during this process that haven't been highlighted, but we want to make sure that we continue to encourage young people, and especially Black women, to run for office.
Thank you, Solandra, Petey, Sheila, Krista.
So in Ohio, I can ditto what all of my cohorts on this call have stated. Is the emerging work that we need to be doing in 2023. We're going to commit definitely, Melanie, to erecting and helping to establish a Black youth vote presence in Ohio. I think the narrative from mainstream media is Black youth saved our democracy, but we want to put the word Black in front of that youth to make sure that our young people are participating in the kind of turnout that we saw in this past election cycle. I want it to be stated that Black youth in Ohio stepped up in ways that they have not. So we're committed to doing that. We will do that work through our partners and having more personal conversations on the doors. I think that's the work that we have to do. Civic engagement is certainly a big component of that. We've got to make sure our folk understand, the various levels of government and what they do and how they impact our lives, so that they can go to the polling booth more educated than they have been. And I think that begins with making sure we have an infrastructure out there able to deliver with Black organizers, data people, communications people, and the whole 9 yards on the ground. And then making sure that we're partnered with enough organizations that we can all be echo chambers for each other to make sure we're getting this message out about the power of the vote in the Black community.
Thank you, Sheila and Krista, and then Krista.
Yes, Melanie, it's great to win, but it's even greater to know how to serve in a seat once you win. And I think that's the problem that we are coming up with Black people. You can't serve in a seat like a white person. You got to serve your people once we get in the seat. So it's going to be training to get people to run for office. They need to have a basic training to really know once they win, they got to serve the people when they get in the seat. But we also got to support them and make sure they understand that they have our support when they have to make the tough decisions when people are gonna come at them. And I don't think that we do that. Once we get a person a seat, we leave them alone with no support. We got to make sure we hold them accountable, but we got to make sure they understand that when they need us, we're gonna be there to rally behind them on tough issues that they will have to face once they get in these seats. So we are gonna definitely do that. We're gonna train Black women and Black people to run for these seats once. Our classes are going to start in March of next year. We are going to work hard to mobilize our Black and brown communities to make sure that they fully understand and be educated on the people who they vote for. And we're going to make sure we mobilize our people to the poll and know exactly what they're doing once they get in this thing. This thing is more serious than ever. We are feeling the buck rate of this here in Alabama. I feel like that we just now feeling our feet, that we got tough shoulders now, Melanie. You know, we feeling it now, we feeling ourselves. We feel like we can fight harder. You know, when we are challenged, we fight hard. And I feel like we are challenged in the state of Alabama. We're gonna fight harder than we ever fought before, and we're gonna win. I feel real good for our state and the Black and brown community.
Thank you, Sheila. And Krista.
Yes,
from
so
my home state. I got multiple home states.
Me too.
I'm a Georgia state. And then I got
So in Virginia, you know, I echo a lot of what our partners said, definitely very important. On the education front, what for me is becoming more and more important is the whole refrain that my vote doesn't matter, that particular phrase. And I feel like we need to do some specific education around either it's the numbers seem so big, they don't have the self-esteem to believe their vote would count. Whatever it is, I think that is something that we're hearing a lot. So we definitely want to focus on that. In terms of the issues, definitely reproductive rights. Virginia, we know there are proposals to create a constitutional right to an abortion, and we know that there are also attempts to stop that. So we know that's going to be big in our legislative session. Unfortunately, with the killing at UVA with the three football players last week, we also know that gun reform is going to be a huge issue in this next legislative session. And when we did our listening session, that came up as well as reproductive rights. And then I'll just say, I definitely agree with everyone. We will definitely want to focus on Black youth vote. We did a listening session that was really, really successful. We want to do that again. And then also, you know, so many of us in this work were really, and as we talk more about 365-day-a-year advocacy, I think we have to remember the people who are doing it, us on this call, us who are on the front lines. We have got to continue to remind each other to take care of ourselves. And like, I think it was, I don't know if it was Tamika or someone else was saying, you know, be that echo chamber for each other. I think that's important. That support of the organizers is going to be critical so we don't burn ourselves out. So we're ready for the fight in Virginia in 2023 and beyond.
Thank you, thank you. So everybody do this. Yes, 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 yes. We are celebrating. Thank everyone. Just want to provide just some brief closing remarks. And as we close out, I asked Christina if she could just kind of show some images. Just going to talk through some thoughts that I had and to close us out. As we all know, Tuesday, November 8th was really indeed a historic day for the nation. We saw impressive engagement and historic turnout amongst Black people, especially our young people, in every corner of this nation. And thanks to the work that you all did, and we, you know, did together, we know it made a difference, especially in a time where threats to our rights, our freedoms were clear and present danger. And quite honestly, we know we saved this democracy, but it was far, far too many people who truly voted. Wasn't about the candidate as much as it was about the message and belief that they were willing to destroy the democracy for there to be a different hierarchy in this nation. Those folks have not gone away because their candidate lost. Those folks are still there. Those folks are there getting ready to vote in Georgia for that runoff. So we have to rest. We have to take care of ourselves, but we cannot take our eyes off of the prize, if you will, as late Congressman John Lewis would always share. We have to remember, it is 365. It's 365 days a year. And in that we get the rest. We have to own the power of our ballot. And I listened, and some of the things you all were saying at the end, we at the National Coalition, I want to thank our team who are on this call, those that aren't on this call, our national, we're a small and mighty force, we try to be. And thank everyone for burning the midnight oil. And we're gonna take a break next week because of that. I think about the time that I got the chance to spend in Florida and where I grew up, and thank you, Solandra, for that video that we won't get to show on this call, but to be able to just go back home and remember why we do what we do and how important it is that we pour into this next generation. Because at the end of the day, all of us were that 18-year-old, that 17-year-old, and how important it is that we continue to do that. So I'm excited about what I heard today about how we're going to continue to build and expand Black Youth Vote. Many of y'all helped us start Black Youth Vote. Some of y'all helped us start Operation Big Vote, and the intergenerational link that we all share. So I'm excited. I am thrilled that we saved this democracy, but it's also time for us to reap the benefits of saving this democracy. So we will continue to fight for our freedom. We will continue to fight for our rights. I thank Roland Martin Unfiltered again for being always on the ready and serving as our media partner to get our message out beyond these boxes that we're in. And so for anyone who's watching out there, if you want to get involved in the National Coalition or connect with the leaders that you heard today, go to unitycampaign.org. It does take resources. We are looking for contributions to help continue to fight in the Georgia runoff and to continue to do the work in 2023 and beyond. The presidential election has really begun as well. So we cannot wait. Our goal, our mission at the National Coalition is to expand the work of Black Youth Vote, to expand the work of our Black Men and Boys initiatives, and of course, continue to grow the work through the Black Women's Roundtable. So stay tuned to learn more about the work that we do. We thank everyone again. And remember, the power of the ballot is 365, not one election cycle. And the power of each of us on this call, we will continue to do the work, but we need everybody to do their part as well. So thank you all. God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care, and we will see you in Georgia.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. See you later.